This example asks us to solve four different absolute value equations. Let's start with the first one. We have absolute value of 6 plus 2n equals 4. For absolute value equations, we break them down into two pieces. The first one, we just keep the outside quantity positive. Everything inside the absolute value always stays positive out here, so we just copy and paste that, 6 plus 2n. Okay, now I'm going to do the positive version, so it's positive 4 outside, and then I'm going to do the negative version. So I keep the stuff inside positive always, and now I'm going to say equals negative 4. Right? And that method will always work for these absolute value equations. Everything inside the absolute value stays positive, it's just cut and pasted, and then outside we do a positive case and a negative case of whatever quantity is outside the absolute value. And then we solve both of those equations. So subtracting 6 from both sides, on the left one here we have 2n equals negative 2, divide by 2, n equals negative 1. Over here we'll subtract 6 on both sides, 2n equals negative 10, divided by 2, n equals negative 5. And note that both of these solutions work, right? If we were to plug in n equals negative 1 up here for n, we would get 6 minus 2 is 4. Absolute value of 4 is indeed 4, right? And we could try n equals negative 5 as well. Plugging in for n, negative 5 here would give us negative 10. 6 plus negative 10 is negative 4. Absolute value of negative 4 is still 4. So both of these answers work. Let's try b. We have absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals 4. When you go to solve these, you want to isolate the absolute value first. Isolate the absolute value first. Okay, that's something you always want to do. That's one of the main places where you can trip up on what otherwise would be basically easy points on an exam, right? You want these to be the place on the exam where you really build up your points, but you can get tripped up if you don't remember to isolate the absolute value first. By isolate, I mean get it on one side of the equal sign by itself. Okay, so let's see. Here we need to add 6 to both sides to get that absolute value of 2x by itself. So absolute value of 2x adding 6 gives us 10. And now we break it down into the positive case and the negative case. The 2x stays the same because that's inside the absolute value. And then on the left we'll do equals 10. And on the right we'll do the negative version, equals negative 10. Then solving each one of these individually by dividing by 2 gives x equals 5 and x equals negative 5. Let's try c. It seems like we're always going to get two answers for these, but here's a case where we don't. Right here, well, the absolute value is already isolated, so we just break into our two cases, but it's kind of weird, right? We have 7x equals 0, and then 7x equals negative 0. But negative 0 isn't really a thing. Negative 0 is the same as 0. Okay, but we already have that case, so we don't need to consider this. So this is one example where you wouldn't get two answers out of these. Right? Simply divide both sides by 7, that gives x equals 0. Okay, so again, easy points if this shows up on an exam. You don't want to get tangled up on these. I'm going to pause right here because there's a problem. Right? Absolute value is always positive. Positive, right? Well, positive is a little bit vague. Let's say always greater than or equal to 0. But negative 7 is less than 0. So there's nothing we could ever solve for here. There's no value of z that we could sub in for this and get this thing, this absolute value, to come out to negative 7. Because absolute values of anything can never be negative. So this one's tricky. This one is actually no solution, the empty set. No solution. Okay, so you need to be a little bit careful with these. If you would have gone on and not seen that and just solved it out, then it's a good idea to check your answers with these and make sure they actually work. But hopefully you can catch it right here when you see the absolute value equals a negative, automatically no solution.